Welcome back. Yes, as I said before, if you can have a notepad or sheets of paper or your computer ready, if you can, because I think as we go, taking little notes could help. I mean, open a Word document or something on your phone. Now, I'm going to say this a few times, rewatch the video. But let's start today by asking ourselves this question. What is a plot? Well, it's a blow-by-blow account of our entire story, really. A plot concerns a character or characters who find themselves in various situations and dependent on your story idea. They triumph and grow or fail and die, and a whole host of other emotions and actions in between, roughly speaking. So whether this is your life story or a detective novel, it actually follows the same format. A strong, interesting plot with a beginning to hook me in, a brilliant middle to keep me gripped, and a satisfying end. That's every story and book, right? Think of your favourite stories or films or books. They follow a pattern. That working plot, it all starts out by explaining to us where we are, with wherever and whoever our lead character or characters are generally. It sets the scene, sets the period. And then the characters start a journey, physically and emotionally, and then finally they reach the end of the story with some type of conclusion, but not always. Writing that bullet point synopsis, remember I said, this really helps you strengthen the plot, because it's that roadmap book, I say. And you have to keep to it, because as you write, you're going to add diversions and clues and twists and surprises. When I did my novella, Circular Motion, remember I told you, you can see it, listen on the Story Hive for nothing. I was jumping all over the place between different characters and locations. And I really needed my roadmap because it kept me on track. I had an ongoing sheet on my computer with people's names, the places, locations, and mini backstories. And I had to set them out because I can't remember everything as I write. Now, those writing programs I keep talking about, I think they have this kind of tracking facility. And as I said, I'm going to repeat myself a few times as we talk about the technical basics of building blocks of a story, how a plot is constructed, what it consists of, and what its components are. So here's a list. I'd like you to write it down. Plot, characters in conflict with others, themselves, and outside forces like nature, sea, space, crime. Theme, setting, genre, exposition, perspective, rising action, good lord, loads of words, protagonist, antagonist, nemesis, conflict, climax, resolution. Don't worry, I'm going to break it down. The plot. What is the plot? Who's doing what? Where? How are they doing it? Who are they doing it with? What happens to everybody? And finally, when and where does the story finish? The point of view. Whose point of view are we getting this story from? Is it a narrator? Is it from a person talking directly to us, or a character in the story, or a general sort of godlike presence telling us the story? You've got to fix this really when you start, because you've got to keep the thing going for the whole piece, otherwise people get confused. If you want, you can change a bit, but you better make it clear what you're doing, otherwise we'll get confused. Who's talking to me now? Now, out of interest, I'm working on a new novel currently where the point of view is the God position, as I call it. And that's me describing what's going on, as in, Joseph Jones yawned and looked out the window as the rain from the sea battered the glass, his head thumping from the night before. You see, that's the kind of God point of view. Another project, I've got my character talking directly to you, as in, I couldn't believe how it ended up in such a place. As I drank my brandy, I had this strong suspicion something or someone was watching me. You see, two different approaches. They both work nicely or well. It's up to you how to tell this story. So think of what you think, which style delivers the story in the best way. Characters. From your main characters to support characters, they've got to be believable, even real. Even if it's a fantasy novel, it doesn't matter. They've got to be likeable or lovable. Some should be unlikable or nasty or mixed up. In other words, use a wide range of characters who can create a chemistry between them. You see, most characters are generally in conflict with others and sometimes themselves. And of course, Outside forces, like I said, nature, sea, space, crime, love, family issues, puzzles to be solved, missions to be achieved. And a good story always runs on some kind of conflicting situation with people struggling with and against other people, inner demons, past experiences, personal, professional situations, other organisations, outside forces, like I said, like nature or space or general life. The theme. What's my story's theme? What's the general theme? Happy, dark, comedic? In other words, what feelings and emotions are you trying to evoke in your readers? And is that central theme clear? Setting. Where is the story set? You've got to make that pretty clear from the outset, because it kind of sets up the genre a bit, which is reflected in the title and the blurb on the back, I know, but you still have to help me, because the reader then knows, is this book for them? All specialist story areas and categories, they become part of your final audience, the search and the marketing plan. You see, if you target these like groups, that really helps, because then you'll find your true fans and your true readers. So set it up, be crucially clear in explaining from the very start. Genre. What is the genre? Crime, love, fantasy, horror. You've got to really establish it, because then people can choose your work, because that's their genre. There's your fans, there's your audience. Crime books sell the most, by the way. I must actually write a detective book at some point. Exposition. Well, that's just the explanation, right, as to what's going on. It moves the story along, and it contains all the elements that keep us understanding and believing it. And most importantly, it hooks us in, keeps us enjoying what's happening. Now, just as a quick aside, in a novel I'm currently writing, for example, I've added a constant series of emails in every chapter. So there's two outside characters we never meet or see or hear about from any of the other characters. But they're just discussing some things between them that helps me move the story along. And this is great, because it means I don't have to write countless pages and character backgrounds and descriptions in loads of cases. Also, I can explain actions and fill out some character details too. And that's a really cool exposition trick. And I'm using it to make clear to you, the reader, exactly what's happening or might happen. Perspective. Are we being realistic? Are we keeping things in perspective? Doesn't matter whether it's fantasy or real. You've got to keep a tight grip on a story. And that means keep it reasonable and in perspective to the reader. And whose perspective or point of view are we getting this story from? Remember? Rising action. I love this one. We need to see what's called rising action. In other words, story information that keeps bubbling up as more actions, interactions, and detailed explanations are happening, because they're going to lead us somewhere interesting. In other words, a writing tension device to keep us gripped into the story as it grows, and it drags us in. It gives us a sense, rising action, things are hotting up, they're moving somewhere interesting, and to a conclusion or multiple conclusions that are going to take us all somewhere really brilliant. Protagonist. Now, we know that word. It's the main character. He's the main protagonist. In other words, the person who's at the centre of our story, we follow them to see what happens to them. You can have multiple main protagonists, by the way, but keep it clear who each of them are and where their place is. Lord of the Rings is a great example of multiple main protagonists. You think about it. Now, antagonist, I love this one. This is a character or a character organisation who stirs things up. They keep our main protagonists or protagonists reacting and being interested in story terms. See, they're what makes our main character react and behave to each new and ongoing situation. Think James Bond and the baddies. They create conflicts, large and small, things our main character or characters have to overcome, think Lord of the Rings, and deal with. Nemesis, my favourite. This is the character that takes so many different forms, but they're essentially the character or organisation who makes our main character resist them, fight them, chase them, fear them. They may not be bad or evil, however, sometimes they are. But remember, they could be a detective who catches the serial killer, or the woman who tracks down her daughter's abductors. The nemesis character is one of the characters or characters who drive the action forwards often, and they lead us often to the ending. Now, in my novella, Circular Motion, I keep talking about it, there were various nemesis characters, some not being people, but just circumstances, or bad luck, or the characters unintentionally damaging themselves by their own stupidity. But they're all catalysts. Think about that. Catalysts. Conflict. Now, a story has to have conflict and drama and danger, up to a point, to spice it up. But what do we mean by conflict? It could be terrorists trying to let off a nuclear bomb, to a father not making it home for his child's birthday. You see? Climax. Every good story has to come to a finish, a big or a small one. But we need to feel we're getting to the end in a satisfying, hopefully unexpected way. So please think about building to the climax, ending as you go. Don't give it away. Now, in some genres, a big finish is best, and a twist, that can be brilliant. But it's down to you. Resolution. Some stories just resolute. They kind of tie themselves up. They resolve, and sometimes don't. Because sometimes it's interesting to let the reader kind of guess what happens next. But sometimes it's quite nice. Personally, I like to wrap it up with a bow. It just feels satisfying to me. It's a personal thing, I guess. Ending. Well, what is an ending? The couple marry. Everyone's dead. The team wins the cup. They catch the murderer. They find the treasure. They complete the mission. The quest is over. But sometimes writers leave it open for a sequel, and others are a bit vague. But that end has to give the reader a kind of closure, a sense of what a great book or a story they've just read. A disappointing ending is the worst thing, so really work on it. Final point. It's an interesting but a tricky and a fun one. What's the title of this? Because that can be a bit of a clincher in terms of readers' interest and engagement. I mean, obviously we decide the title once the book's finished, but it's fun to play around right now. So dream up a cool title, a working title. Just suits a story. Sounds intriguing and interesting. Now, at the time of me recording this for you, my latest book is called The 5 Deaths of Sergeant Grimes. Neat story idea, huh? See you next time. Happy writing.